though, to build a lively New York City neighborhood, and the district includes schools, houses of worship, clubs, and commercial buildings that help tell the complete story of the West End. HDC is also glad to see that the proposed district extends to Broadway, where important buildings that have long-awaited landmarking, such as the Broadway Fashion Building, stand. Again, HDC thanks LPC for working closely with the community and establishing a steady path towards designation of the Riverside Drive West End area. We hope this mode of landmarking large districts, calendaring the pieces together at once, and then scheduling separate hearings for each throughout the year, proves manageable and will be used again in other areas such as Crown Heights North and Bedford-Stuyvesant in Brooklyn. Thank you.
Okay. Andrew Dolkart and then Kate Wood.
Hi, my name is Andrew Dolkart. I'm the author of the West End Avenue Survey, as you've heard, which I did for WEPS, but I'm here today speaking on my own behalf in enthusiastic support of the designation of this district. I like the idea that the Landmarks Commission took a report that was prepared for the community and used it as a base to expand to something larger and even more comprehensive. And I compliment the Commission on that. I think one of the interesting things that's occurred in the historic preservation world in the last 20 years, or even more recently, and something that I'm very, very interested in, is the protection of the vernacular fabric of everyday buildings in New York. And I think that perhaps when the area was surveyed 20 years ago, as some previous speakers have noted, there wasn't such an appreciation for the fact that New York is not the city of McKinley and White and Delano and Aldrich and Gordon Bunshaft, but it is the city of Schwartz and Gross and George and Edward Blum. And these architects who may not be the most famous architects, but give the fabric of New York. They give us what we love about New York every day. And I think that that's a key thing for the preservation world to be turning to preserve that which gives New York the flavor that makes it a great and unique city in the world. And I think this is particularly true of the 20th century vernaculars, and especially of apartment buildings. And I think that this district and the later parts of the district give us the opportunity to really examine this important part of our heritage. What did the 1901 Tenement House Law do? Why do we have 9, 12, and 15-story apartment houses? Why did the law in 1929 allow for taller buildings like the Vogue in Paris building or like the building on the corner of 79th Street and West End Avenue? What about the design and the massing and the materials and the marketing? These are all really crucial issues that I think this historic district brings up. And what's more, how many places in the world are there where you can start in German Hohenzollern, and you can turn around and you're in Wexford, England, and you can go across the street and you're in Umbria in Italy, and you can end up in San Jose. And you can do all this because of the names of the apartment buildings, which, you know, I love the naming of apartment houses because it's often very funny. But these are really important because this was a key way of marketing these buildings and giving an identity to each one of these buildings that to some people may all look the same, but each one is identifiable as a unique work. And so I look forward to the designation and the designation report for this district. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Kate Wood.
Kate Wood, and then Matthew Hoskins, and will be next.
Good afternoon, and thank you. I'm Kate Wood, the Executive Director of Landmark West. Landmark West celebrated its 25th anniversary this past year, which prompted some fairly strenuous digging through the archives, reconstructing the history of concerted efforts to preserve the special character of the Upper West Side. There, among the yellowing flyers and fading thermofaxes, were still fresh reminders of how close our neighborhood came to losing, and still could lose, landmarks that make it one of the most beautiful, vibrant, livable, valuable places on Earth. Back in 1985, only a handful of buildings on the Upper West Side were officially designated as landmarks. It's astonishing to look back now and realize that places like the Normandy Apartments on Riverside Drive and the iconic skyline of Central Park West were still then unprotected. The loss and near loss of buildings like the Second Church of Christ Scientist on West 68th Street, thankfully saved and not only surviving, but thriving today served as a powerful wake-up call that nothing less than the soul of the Upper West Side was at stake, a realization paralleled today by the recent destruction of historic row houses on West End Avenue and side street mid-blocks where out-of-character towers now rise. Then, as now, the community and local leaders mobilized in strong support of historic district designation. 23 years ago, in his first appearance before a government body since leaving office 15 years prior, former mayor and Upper West Sider, John Lindsay, testified at the Landmarks Preservation Commission in favor of the Upper West Side Central Park West Historic District. His words are worth remembering. About the then proposed district, he said, "I see this as part of a renewed public awareness of the fact that the quality of our lives, not just the quantity of our commercial ventures, deserves high priority, that government has an essential role in the safeguarding of those features of our environment that simply cannot be left to the law of the jungle, where each economic interest seeks dominance. If we believe that the preservation of the finest of our past has given us, for the future to enjoy as well, is a positive value, then this city and this commission are essential to this task." The Upper West Side community applauds the commission and its diligent staff for recognizing that its work in our neighborhood is not yet complete, for paying close attention to architectural historian Andrew Scott Dolkart's extensive research and vigorous endorsement of expanding the existing West End Avenue districts, and for going even further to include the side streets, major cross streets, and most of Riverside Drive and Broadway from 70th Street to 109th Street. This area contains close to a dozen individual sites that have been on Landmark West's wish list of landmark priorities for more than 20 years. Places like First Baptist Church on 79th Street and Broadway, the Pueblo Deco Cliff Dwelling on 96th Street and Riverside Drive, and the Level Club on the mid-block of West 73rd Street. As we pointed out in the letter to the Commission dated November 3rd, 2010, we do question the omission of certain sites and urge commissioners to consider including places such as Strauss Park at 107th Street, the IRT electrical substation on West 96th Street, and in the extension specifically under consideration today, the elegant two-story commercial building on Broadway between 82nd and 83rd Streets, which clearly relate to the architectural fabric and story of the proposed district. That said, the proposed boundaries largely recognize the importance of preserving not just individual buildings or streets, but an entire neighborhood context. Not just the cohesive vista of West End Avenue, but also the exuberant skyline of Riverside Drive, the commercial energy of Broadway, and the stately CPH Gilbert townhouses of West 86th Street. Together, this diverse collection of buildings tells a resonant story of how the Upper West Side became what it is today. That is one of the most appealing, alluring places in the world. Landmark West strongly supports the proposed Riverside West End Historic District Extension number 1, and we look forward to reiterating our support for additional extensions at future public hearings. Thank you.
Okay, as I said, Matthew Hoskinson will be next, and then Borough President Scott Stringer.
Thank you for accommodating my request. I was like to catch in a couple of hours. My name is Matthew Hoskinson, and I serve as the pastor of the First Baptist Church in the city of New York. Our congregation has a rich history in the city. We were chartered in 1745. Our first pastor was George Washington's chaplain during the Revolution. In the early days, our church met in Lower Manhattan before relocating to Midtown on Park Avenue in the mid-19th century. The congregation outgrew that space after the Civil War and decided to move to our present location at the corner of 79th and Broadway. The foundation was laid in 1891, and our church completed the move shortly thereafter. For the past 120 years, then, First Baptist Church has been a fixture on the Upper West Side, and we are grateful for this heritage. To this day, many of our members live in the neighborhood and walk to church every Sunday. We take seriously the commission from our Lord to be salt and light in the community in which He has placed us. We exist in the Upper West Side for the good of the Upper West Side and are glad to serve our neighborhood by spreading the hope that we have found in Christ. It may then surprise you that when informed of the proposal to include our building in this historic district, Our members passed a resolution to state formally our opposition. You may be further surprised to know that the vote was unanimous. If you've ever attended a church business meeting, you know how unusual that is. Before I give the reasons for our opposition, please allow me to clarify. We do not oppose landmarking because we have plans to raise our building. Its symbolism is rich, as is evidenced by the most distinguishing feature of our building, the two towers, which are a visible testimony that the risen Christ, symbolized by the completed taller tower, is building his church around the world, completed by the incomplete-looking tower. Furthermore, we do not oppose landmarking because we care little about our neighbors. Our Lord instructed us very clearly that after loving God with heart, soul, mind, and strength, we are to love our neighbors as ourselves. We understand that some may wish to have our building landmarked so that we are hindered from doing something that may impact them negatively. I assure you, any decision that we make with our building will take seriously our relationship with our neighbors. Our desire is to show the same kind of love and mercy to our neighbors that Jesus has shown to us. We have 3 reasons for opposing our inclusion in this district, 2 financial, and then the 3rd philosophical. First, the landmarking of our building would cause the loss of tens of millions of dollars in the value of our property. We want to be good stewards of what our Lord has given to us. For the past century and a quarter, we have built and maintained our facility at our own expense. We believe that the decision to landmark would have negative ramifications on our church's financial health. Second, because of the need to hire professionals to obtain commission approval and the need to follow commission guidance as to how exterior work could be carried out, any maintenance or renovations that we would desire to make would take much more time and be substantially more expensive. We are not a wealthy congregation. While our desire would be to remain in the Upper West Side, we do not have large endowments, so the current expenses of our church are shouldered by our members and regular attenders. We believe that the decision to landmark would put an enormous and unnecessary financial burden on our congregation. Third, and most importantly, we believe that landmarking impinges on our First Amendment rights and free exercise of religion. Our building is the hub of our ministry. As we prayerfully contemplate how we may best minister to the community, we desire to retain our freedom to put the needs of our Christian ministry ahead of the appearance of the building. If we want to begin a homeless ministry, a women's shelter, or an educational service, it may become necessary for us to make alterations in order to fulfill our ministry initiatives. We believe that the decision to landmark would limit the free exercise of our religion in at least 2 ways. A, in carrying out your responsibilities, the Commission might sit in review of our determination that a change is needed for ministry reasons, and B, the Commission might refuse permission to do something that we would want to do in order to enhance our ministry. We desire to retain the freedom to use our building as the Lord directs. It really is not possible to separate form from function. We therefore humbly submit our formal opposition to the inclusion of our building in this historic district. We realize that this is likely an unpopular decision, yet we believe it is the right decision for the future of our church and our service to the community. In conclusion, we affirm that a building is not what makes us a church. Before we are anything else, we are gospel people, people who are being transformed by the good news that Jesus lived and died for us. We know that, even as St. Paul said, the message of the cross is foolishness, but for us it is the power of God. We do not need a building or money, or even our First Amendment rights for that matter, for us to be a people who love God and neighbor. As long as He has stationed us at the corner of 79th and Broadway, we are committed to being people of the gospel in the Upper West Side for the Upper West Side. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Scott Stringer. Welcome as always.
Good to be here, Mr. Chairman, and I want to thank you and the Landmarks Preservation Commission for the opportunity to testify today on the Riverside West End Historic District Extension 1. I support this designation as it will preserve the historic buildings of West End Avenue and strengthen the aesthetic continuity of the Upper West Side. Any individual traversing West End Avenue cannot help but marvel at the historical richness of the area's building style. It is that richness of architectural style and materials that have contributed to making the Upper West Side one of the most successful and desirable residential communities in the city. The buildings in the proposed district were largely developed between 1880 and 1920, including some of the finest and oldest examples of pre-war multiple dwelling unit structures in Manhattan. These stately apartment buildings were built out to their lot lines, which created a contextual built form, and as a result, a unique sense of place. This collection of buildings, designed by many of the city's most notable architects, not only showcases a unique historic style worthy of recognition, but it exhibits the city's evolving housing and social history. Development on West End Avenue was spurred by the extension of rail and subway lines to the Upper West Side. During this period, apartment buildings for the first time became respectable living quarters for the middle class. The new building stock drew more residents to the area and created an environment for this community to grow. Further, it is important for you to know that this proposal was not developed in a bubble, but rather evolved after countless community meetings with a wide range of stakeholder involvement. In 2007, the West End Preservation Society, or WEPS, was formed after the scheduled demolition of two beautiful brown townhouses on West End Avenue. In an effort to deter further destruction of historically significant buildings, WEPS hired a leading architectural historian to survey the historical merit of the buildings along West End Avenue. His findings make a convincing case for why the avenue deserves a historic district designation and showcases the impact communities can have when they work with the experts. I greatly appreciate and commend the Landmarks Preservation Commission and its staff for their swift work on the extension thus far. The proposed extension we are discussing today is an important first step, and I look forward to the next two extension hearings later this year. This extension will not only protect the historic nature of West End Avenue corridor, but is a true testament to what a determined community can accomplish. Therefore, I strongly urge the Commission to take the first step in preserving the first of three sections of the West End Historic District. Thank you again for giving me this opportunity. Thank you for the respect you've shown to our community, and I look forward to collaborating with you on designating this really incredible place that I call home as a West Sider, but I think everyone would recognize this is truly a very beautiful and well thought out community that merits your consideration. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Todd. Faith Steinberg, and then Meg Pinto, or Pinto.
Sorry about that.
Okay.
Good afternoon, and thanks for this opportunity. You are urged to create the West End Historic District. This morning I heard on the radio a developer, which I believe is a misnomer. They are destroyers of our neighborhoods, the environment, and quality of life. He was saying that this designation would hamper economic development. The only development their plans would create is bigger bank accounts. What is blocking economic development is the real estate industry. Companies cannot afford the exorbitant rents, and there's no affordable housing for their employees. Another report I heard is that the city is having problems disposing of their garbage. Building these monster structures can only exacerbate the problem, along with the other infrastructure problems. For example, water shortages, electric outages, congestion, pollution, etc. But for me, this is also an aesthetic problem. When I was a kid, I used to read the comics. That was a long time ago. There remains with me an image of a futuristic city called Gotham City, all tall, box-like structures. They would have us living in this comic strip world. The West Side is among the most densely populated areas, and given the opportunity, these developers would pave over Central Park. What a location. Please designate the West End Historic District. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Meg Pinto, Meg here. There she is. Okay. And Jesse Hecht next.
My name is Meg Pinto. I live in the Alameda at 255 West 84th. I am a member of our board, and I have to say I am the only board member who is in fact in favor of the designation. But one of the reasons I am is because when we faced major local law 11 repairs, what was clear was that our building was in worse shape because balconettes had simply been ripped off without adequate preparation behind the surface of the facade, etc. It cost us a fortune to repair the damages that came from wanton destruction at an earlier time. That's my terminology. I'm not speaking for the board at large. And what I think I want to say, two things. It's very important, in fact, to discourage people from the kind of destruction that my building, in fact, experienced in the last, say, 30 years, but also to say how crucial it is to help buildings pay for these repairs, because to do it right is phenomenally expensive. So I hope that, in fact, people will always keep in mind the cost. I absolutely think it's worth doing, and I'm very eager to have the district go through. But I also have to speak for individual co-op shareholders who are faced with enormous bills when they do have to make repairs, and anything the city or the state can do is enormously welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Jesse Hecht. And then Ellen Mulder's on, something like that. I can't quite read it, I'm sorry, but please proceed, Jesse Hecht.
Thank you, good afternoon. I'm submitting a memorandum which I will try to briefly summarize. To begin with, my name is Jesse A. Hecht, and I'm here representing 355 West 85th Street Corp., the owner of 355 West 85th Street, Isidore Silverman, owner of 309, 339, 345, 349, and 350 West 85th Street, and Carl Weistuck and 495 West End LLC, the owners of 495 West End Avenue. The owners I'm speaking for strongly object to the proposed extension. To begin with, and we're going to length in the memorandum, but there is no legal basis for it under the administrative code. At least none has been shown. It doesn't meet, I won't take your time now, but it does not meet the factors set forth in 25-302H of the administrative code. The special character, special historical, aesthetic, interesting value, the distinct section, and so on. All that's been presented so far is a commission-issued description which contains lists of architects, lists of styles, neo-Greek, Lunan, Romanesque, etc., descriptions like exuberant use of material and so on. However, in this description is no reference, either in terms of the, even in terms of the architect or the style, to any particular apartment buildings, whether any of these unidentified buildings still even exist at this date, whether they've been changed, whether they are among those that have already been individually landmarked. In fact, the conclusion of the description simply says that the district proposed extension reflects the history of development in the Upper West Side during the late 19th and early 20th centuries and through to the present day. That's a statement that can be made virtually about any neighborhood in the city. Any neighborhood will represent to some extent or another the history of its development through the present day. Now, the arbitrary nature of this proposed extension is further highlighted by the fact that, as some earlier speakers mentioned, there is the existing Riverside West End Historic District, which was designated in 1989. Now, in so designating that historic district, the Commission had to have found under the statute that it constituted a distinct section of the city by reason of its special character or special historic or aesthetic interest or value. As found by the Commission in designating the original area, the proposed extensions were not seen to be part of that distinct section of the city. Now, the owners I represent are aware that under the Administrative Code, the Commission, in order to effectuate the purposes of the code, may designate changes in the locations and boundaries of the designated historic district. But this is not obviously simply an adjustment to boundaries or minor extension. I mean, the additions are many times what the original district, many times the area of the original district. Now, no facts or reasons are given as to why these large new tracts and hundreds of additional buildings should now be included in what was purportedly a distinct section of the city. Again, I won't take further time on the legal end, it's all in our memorandum. However, apart from purely legal considerations, there's no justification for imposing the burdens of landmark designation upon the hundreds of owners who would be forced into this expanded district. Most of these buildings, again, as has been mentioned earlier, are not architecturally or historically distinguished. Again, in the Commission's description, it doesn't cite particular apartment buildings as being distinguished, particularly on the side streets. However, if in fact the area covered by the proposed extension has preserved a special character or historic or aesthetic interest or value since the 1880s, it has done so without coming under the rule of the Commission. It has done so because of the efforts of the building owners who have devoted themselves to maintaining, operating, and preserving their properties, and have done so without being subject to the onerous, arbitrary processes of the Commission. Now, anyone who is personally familiar with the West Side, or even superficially with its development and history, I think it would be struck by one significant omission from the Commission's history of its development is contained in the description, and many of the histories of its development we've heard today. And that's the fact of the sharp decline in the area which took place in the 1960s and 1970s, both the physical condition and the maintenance of many buildings, as well as the quality of life. And when I speak of the physical condition and maintenance, I think it's particularly on many side streets, such as West 85th Street, even some of the buildings on West End Avenue. There's so many of the neighborhood's buildings have been brought back to the character which they now do possess. It is due in large part to their owners. Among those who acquired these buildings, including smaller apartment buildings in the 1960s and 70s, were immigrants who came here after World War II, who took the risk of investing whatever savings they had in acquiring dilapidated properties in the neighborhood few would then invest in, who renovated properties, frequently themselves, and provided housing at rent-regulated rents, and whose families now carry on the daily operation and maintenance of these buildings. That is certainly the case for the owners for whom I'm speaking today. The neighborhood has a character it does, not through any government commissions or self-appointed groups who have not participated in and do not know the effort and investment necessary to maintain these buildings, to provide housing at rent-regulated rents, but who simply wish to regulate and govern those who do. Since, therefore, it is the owners who have maintained the character of the neighborhood to what it is, there's no reason to believe that the character of the neighborhood will not continue to be preserved. On the other hand, there's every reason to believe that the owners will continue to operate their buildings as they have to date, without the dead hand of commission regulation being imposed on hundreds more buildings in the area. In fact, nothing has now changed or happened which would justify subjecting hundreds more of these buildings to such regulation. Now, as I go into detail in the memorandum, this is not...
I want to remind you of the 3 minutes, which is way over by now, and if you could sum up.
Okay,
that would be great. Thank you very much.
I will sum up.
Sure.
I will just say that in my memorandum, this is not an abstract concern, theoretical concern. We give you actual examples of a building within the extension that was individually designated, and what the owner there had to go through and being not able to protect the building, as well as a building that is in the current historic district, and what the owner there, a year-long process to put some coating on the front of the building, and most significantly, and I'll just conclude with this, many of you might not realize that commission regulation covers even sidewalk repairs. And we cite the example there of the owner, without a city violation, noticed a sidewalk hazard, and it took 2.5 months to get the commission's permit to repair a sidewalk. That's the reality. It's fine to talk about aesthetic theory, but these are the realities. So just my final conclusion
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much.